Well, we're off and running on the Krueger Show. Hope everybody's having a great July the 29th. It's 5 o'clock on the West Coast, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Matt Barrows, who does a great job covering the 49ers for The Athletic, joins us on the Krueger Show. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in both spots from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. And they do run out. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Check them out in Pacific Grove. My good friend Anthony Catania running for all your sports cards and collectible needs. Anthony Catania there along the Monterey Peninsula, second to none. Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Proud sponsor of the Krueger Show. Today was a big day. The first day the pads came on. And it was a big day in the Athletic as well, because our guest, Matt Barrows, has done a breakdown of the top 6 training camp competitions, and he's here on the Krueger Show to break it all down. Matty, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you, Krug. Thanks for having me on.
Man, you know, people love when you're on so much. I mean, you can see in the chat, there's always people, oh, Matty. You have just a cult following that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. How many years have you covered the 49ers? Because you're probably not the senior member of the media crew, but you have covered them for multiple regimes.
Yes. 2002 was my first season, and that was Mariucci's last season. And then the next year, Dennis Erickson came on. And the year after that, they were a 2-win team, I think, in 2004. Remember, that was the Tim Rattay, Eric Johnson year. Those were their two best offensive players that year. Brandon Lloyd started to come onto the scene at that point. So, yeah, I have seen quite a few iterations of the 49ers. And I will say that, you know, this group, along with the Jim Harbaugh-led teams, I started off training camp sort of comparing this year's team to the 2013 team, which was just as loaded as this one is. And that was the year that the 49ers were coming off a Super Bowl loss to the Ravens. They realized, you know, this was the last dance for them. Justin Smith, Patrick Willis were starting to, their bodies were starting to betray them in various ways. They knew that at least that iteration of the team wouldn't be together for very long. And so I felt like there was a weight that they carried into that season. And I don't think it's quite as prominent this year, but you get that whiff. You get the whiff of okay, we have a loaded team now. We need to take advantage of what we have currently.
Well, and, you know, it's funny. You mentioned Dennis Erickson. I think of the moments that Kevin Lynch and I looked at each other and just both said, uh-oh. It was the day we both met Dennis Erickson. And Dennis Erickson's first statement to me was, "Are you the guy from Coors?" And I said, no, actually, I'm not. I'm from KMBR. And the look on his face of disappointment when I told him I wasn't from Coors. And then Kevin Lynch walked up and I said, I pointed over towards Lynch and I said, I think that guy might be from Coors. And he goes right up to Lynch. He's like, "You from Coors?" And Lynch, you know, gave him a one-liner. "I wish I was from Coors." Dennis Erickson was very, very passionate at the beginning of his Niner tenure and getting a kegerator installed in his office. That right there could have been an indication of bad things to come.
I heard one of the anecdotes, and I don't know if it's true or not, was that after he was fired following the 2004 season, they, you know, were cleaning out the office in anticipation of Mike Nolan coming in. And they kept finding beer cans kind of stashed in, you know, various places, like emergency brews. In case of emergency, you pull this book and okay, behind here is 2 more cans of beer. So hey, Larry, you did a great job of stocking that office with beer. I mean,
yeah.
Your second job as a beer salesman really was effective.
Well, let's get right into your piece because I think it's really, really good. The top 6 training camp competitions. And why don't we start with what I think is kind of the headline of the day, and that is the 4th defensive end job. There's 3 really good ones, right? You got Nick Bosa, and you've got Leonard Floyd, who I think is going to be the second, the best second, rusher they've had since they've been here, and then Gross Matos, to me, has been a revelation. I think in the early going, I like the way he looks, and I love what I'm seeing out of Robert Beal. But Drake Jackson, we found out today, is going to miss the rest of training camp. He's been out since October with this knee injury. And a lot of people are saying, Cam Inman was sitting next to me today, and he was saying that it may be the similar injury to the one that Weston Richburg may have had that caught the end of his career. What can you tell us about Drake? Because you know me, I'm a huge Drake fan. I think this is one of the best interviews on the team. He's one of my favorite guys to talk to. I root extra hard for Drake. What's the latest, Maddie?
Yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to see him in training camp, which would mean that he's not going to be on the active roster when the regular season begins. In which case, he's already on the PUP reserve list. He would go on, or he's on the PUP active list. He would go on PUP reserve, which would mean he misses the first 4 games of the season at least. It's probably going to be more than that. And if it does sort of carry out the same way as McGlinchey's injury, remember, McGlinchey suffered his midway through 2021, and he had the big surgery in November of 21. And then the next year he came back and he played 20 games. That was the year that they went to Philadelphia for the NFC Championship game, et cetera. He started each of those games, and he was really sort of proud of himself for coming back from that big injury and being able to play every game and, putting himself in the best spot available for free agency. And of course he was picked up, signed a big deal with the Broncos. My point is that if it sort of followed that pattern, Drake Jackson had his surgery in early January. So, I think there's a chance that he comes back. Let's just say it's October, and he would be healthy at that point and perhaps able to play a lot of games. He would need, I think he would need an injury somewhere else at defensive end to get onto the field at that point, because I think that Robert Beal, like you said, is the number 4 guy. He's bigger. He's strong. He's bigger than he was last year. They're using him on special teams too. I think he's going to be a real asset on kickoff coverage in particular. The whole kind of composition of those kick teams is going to be different this year because of the new rule.
Right.
I think that they want bigger, swifter guys, and I think Robert Beal sort of is the archetype for what's going to work on those units. So he's going to be hard to dislodge, especially if he's got a regular role on special teams.
Well, okay, so that they want, let's say, 10 D linemen, 5 D tackles, 5 D ends. Let's say you got 3 of them in tow right now. Bosa, Floyd, Yatir, Gross, Matos. Let's just give Beal that 4th job. That means that they need to find a 5th guy out of Austin Bryant, Alex Barrett, the kid from Maryland, who's a really nice guy too. I have Sam Okawayanu.
Number 91, I call him.
Number 91. He's a great athlete. I mean, believe me, this is a phenomenal athletic guy at 270 pounds, 275 pounds. He looks kind of like a sawed off tackle combo end, but he's not he's a little bit more athletic than people think. But what do you think, Matt? Shanahan, I think, maybe answered this question today. I think somebody may have asked him the question, how do you feel about your D-line depth? And he said, hey, we liked our D-line depth coming into camp, and 5 days into camp, we still like our D-line depth, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like much of a competition for that last roster spot.
No, I agree with you. I mean, they could kind of keep it open, that 5th defensive end spot, and just have it sort of waiting for Drake Jackson when he's available to come back. They're deeper at defensive tackle than they've been in a while. Yeah. Beyond, let's just say the top 3 are Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, and then Kevin Givens. Let's say those are the top four. And then you've
Right.
also got Kalia Davis. You've got Evan Anderson. I know they like him,
I
undrafted
love
guy,
him.
rookie. They've got Shaquille Brown, another young player that I think that they're going to end up liking. So there's some guys that they probably want to keep around at that position as well. So maybe they go long on DT and go short on DN, at least to start the season while Drake Jackson is still recovering.
Yeah, that's a good one. T.Y. McGill's another guy who's there, and he's a pretty none of those guys embarrass themselves either. If there's been one takeaway early on, it's the look of 60 and 66, Anderson and Shaquille Brown. I think Brown's 60 and Anderson 66, but these guys are just big. I mean, Brown's lower legs. I mean, his legs are just tree trunks, and yet he's kind of quick. And Anderson moves exceptionally well at whatever weight he's at. But somebody said 315. There's no chance he's 315.
That's one of his.
I'm 315 if he's 315. I mean, come on, that guy's easily 340. And he moves. I mean, he's moving well at 340. It's kind of intriguing when you think of what they paid him as an undrafted free agent. They obviously saw something in him, and just watching him in some of these workouts, you're like sitting there going, you know what? If I'm Kalia Davis or T.Y. McGill, those guys are going to be hard fought to keep their spots with Anderson and Brown there.
I think you were standing next to me when we were talking to Chris Kasurik earlier this spring, and each of us was asking him questions about different players, Evan Anderson being one and Shaquille Brown being another. And there was a theme to his answers, which was, we really miss DJ Jones.
Right.
A big, wide-bodied guy who can get up the field. And he left also to the Broncos by a free agency a couple of years ago. And they really haven't had that guy since then. I mean, obviously they brought in Javon Hargrave. I think that they're looking for an even bigger guy, sort of a nose tackle sized guy that can eat up a couple of blockers on a given play. But also DJ Jones got into the backfield in a flash.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a good pass rusher, and maybe not a sack master, but somebody who put pressure on the pocket. And I think those guys, all of a sudden, they have a bunch of these big bowling ball shaped guys. And Malik Collins is in that category too. So it's Collins, it's Brown, it's Evan Anderson. Maybe not quite Kalia Davis, maybe not quite Kevin Givens. They're both very quick. They're smaller. I say smaller. They're both 300-pounders, but smaller than these guys that we're mentioning, who are just massive, massive guys.
Yeah, I think they saw in that Detroit game at Detroit's offensive line, which is a great offensive line, and it's going to be a force to be dealt with for years to come. And they saw that offensive line climbing to the second level and starting to pick off Warner and Greenlaw. And they're like, you know what? We can't have this. We have to have some big-bodied guys up front that can eat up some of these, keep Warner and Greenlaw fresh and free to run and hit, because that's their game. And Anderson and Brown, I think, are the answer to that. And it was funny because as we were talking to Chris so many times when we asked him about the origins of these players in the organization, it came back right to him. He's like, yeah, I liked this player, 3 years ago in Detroit. I liked this player. I really liked Shaquille Brown 2 years ago and was trying to get him here. But Tennessee outbid us. And then when he came free, I wanted him. And he very much, I think I even asked him, I said, are you one of the reasons Evan Anderson is here? He's like, yes, absolutely. So it sounds like Chris has given a big say-so in who's in his room, huh?
Agree. And I think that's a key to success. I mean, what's the Bill Parcells quote? If you're going to ask me to cook the meal, at least allow me to shop for the groceries. So if there's buy-in from guys like Chris Kasurik, it means that these guys are probably going to get off on the right foot. And you're right. I mean, Chris Kasurik keeps a dossier on everyone that he likes and keeps them in mind. And when they become available, this team often jumps for them, and that's what we saw. Malik Collins. We talked to him today. He
Yeah.
corroborated that. He said that he thought that he was going to end up with Kasarik in Detroit when he was coming out of the draft that year. So the admiration has been obvious to some of these guys. I mean, just in talking to Chris Kasarik coming out of the draft and in draft visits and things like that, they have an idea of which teams, which coaches like them coming out of the draft. And so, eventually Chris Kasarik gets his guys.
It sounds like I'm doing your background work for you, but, there's an article to be written. I mean, the Niners in their heyday, one of the strengths of the dynasty was that they didn't have to draft offensive linemen early because McKittrick could find offensive linemen late. They seem to have found something similar to that right now with Forster, or at least they have a similar philosophy. And then Ray Rhodes, was so good at identifying defensive backfield talent that, he was such a key guy to get back in the organization after he left. But so you had the defensive backfield and the offensive line, maybe the two hardest positions to coach, not just dialed in by good coaches, but good coaches that knew what talent they needed. And also you didn't have to invest necessarily first round picks to satisfy those coaches. In some ways, almost like Bobby T. And you see that with the Niners with Bobby T and a little bit with Forster, a little bit with Kasarik. They can get by with their guys, and you got to have a couple coaches that are really good personnel guys if you're going to have a great team. And the Niners seems like had that back in the day and still very much do. The second position was linebacker, and this one's really interesting because we expected Fred Warner and Devondre Campbell to be the first two linebackers. But when the third linebacker's on the field, I thought it was going to be, probably D. Winters. It's been Curtis Robinson, the former Stanford player, to this point. And if it's not going to be him, it might be Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. Oren Burks, you mentioned in the article, left for the Falcons. So what do you think? I mean, to me, the guy that I love is Jalen Graham, and he's made a play today against the run where he just stepped right into the hole at the line of scrimmage. I think it was on Mason, and just went belly to belly with him and just halted his progress. And then, of course, Mason kept running, and it looks like a long run. But Graham is my guy in that linebacker group. I think he's really special. But other people love Winters. What do you think, Maddie? Who's going to be It's not going to be Curtis Robinson, is it?
Well, Robinson wasn't in that spot today because Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles was back from his injury. He got injured in the very early in the first practice, and so I think that's why Curtis Robinson has been in there. But I mean, Curtis Robinson, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, I'm not sure you want either of those guys as your number 3 linebacker, because the number 3 linebacker is, there's an injury to 1 and 2. He's your number 2 linebacker. It's an every down position. So I agree with everything you said. I really like Jalen Graham. The issue, quote unquote, issue with Graham is that he's been basically the backup middle linebacker. So he doesn't get as many opportunities at the weak side spot or the strong side spot, the 2 outside linebacker spots, as some of these other guys. And I will say that, D. Winters is exactly what you want. There's so much ground that position has to cover. There's so much pass coverage duty as far as dropping into a space and being in charge of a big chunk of the field. And you have to be fast to do that. And, Winters is very fast. He's defensive back, in terms of his speed. Jalen Graham is not. His time speed isn't that good. He's good at pursuing. Like I said, when he's at middle linebacker, it's a little like Fred Warner, 2 kind of longer, long-limbed players back there, which creates its own kind of passing obstacles. But that's why they like Winters. He covers a lot of ground. You just mentioned coaches who end up liking players, and those players end up landing on the 49ers. Johnny Holland, the linebackers coach, thought he looked a lot like Dre Greenlaw coming out of TCU. And that's exactly why the 49ers used a 6th-round pick on him.
About Mr. Greenlaw, he was out there watching today. I mean, you can see him. This is a guy. I love Dre Greenlaw, man. I don't wear jerseys, but if I did wear a Niner jersey, I'd probably wear Greenlaw's 57 because I just love his whole approach to the game. I mean, this guy would play for free. He's out there on the sidelines today in the team portion, and you can just see the way he's rooting on his teammates. He's all in. He's emotionally invested. He's mentally invested. He's just an awesome guy. And what do you think, though, Matt? I mean, the guy tore his Achilles. It was February. Give me a real. People are talking about, is he going to miss time? Of course he's going to miss time. He's gonna miss the whole season, isn't he? I mean, when's the earliest you think Greenlaw realistically could be back?
Well, the 49ers have had good success with Achilles injuries. It's something that their surgeon does really well. Remember Crabtree's injury. Forget whether that happened in May or not, but he was back during that season. And that one happened in the spring. It happened in OTAs. So I think him coming back mid-season is realistic. We were at the Dwight Clark event in San Jose in May, and Dre Greenlaw got an award there, and he came onto the stage, and he was just off of his crutches, and he's getting around like an old man. I mean, he was obviously addled when he walked up there. Now you see him, and you wouldn't know that he's injured. He's moving around. He's kind of messing around with the guys at practice. He looks good. My point is that from May to July, he made a lot of progress. So he's going to make more from July to September. And I think, late October, I think that's realistic for him to come back. I don't know how many games that is, 6, 7, 8. I really thought that he was sort of the bellwether for the defense last year. He was banged up a lot, and it wasn't just the Achilles that he was dealing with at the end of the season. There was a shoulder, there was an ankle, there was this, there was that. There were games where he did not look like himself. And when he didn't look like himself, the defense didn't look like itself. And so I think that that's something the 49ers have to realize, is that making sure that he's not only back 100%, but he's fresh. He sets a tone for this team. So my point is they're not going to rush him back. They want him there in December, January, and February. That's going to be the priority. But I don't think it's unrealistic to think that he'll play half the season.
I think the most interesting competition this summer is this next one, and that's the return man. Because the return rules have changed, and Ray left to go to the Falcons in free agency, and so they've got Trent Taylor, and they brought in Trent, and he's very reliable, and they drafted Cowing, and they drafted Pearsall, and you've got Ronnie Bell, and then you drafted Isaac Guerrero, and you still have Danny Gray, and Debo is a return guy, and they just have so many different options. And I asked Shanahan today after the practice, I said, are you getting, now that you've seen enough reps of this play, are you getting a feeling for what kinds of traits you're looking for in the return guy? And he kind of said not yet, and I kind of agree with him. I don't think we really know. But to me, it's kind of because the return man gets to work up a head of steam. Before, it used to be the opposite. The guys in the coverage units had a head of steam, and the return guys had to be like super quick and then with long speed. So like the guys who did really good in the return game could dodge the first guy, get to an open spot, and then have the speed to take it the distance. And so those kinds of players excelled. This looks different, Matt. This looks like maybe the thicker, more powerful guys like Debo or Guerrero might have the advantage, because you get 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe even 5, steps of momentum before the defense is really on you. And if you're one of these 220, 230 guys, 230 pounds, those guys are usually pretty hard to stop once they get ahead of steam. What do you think? You've watched this play practiced a bunch the last few months. Do you have a thought on what the good returners are going to be in this the new rules?
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers should be set up well to handle this play because a lot of people have said it's going to be like an outside zone run where you kind of run laterally for a little while, you find a seam, and then you hit it. So their runners should be used to running like that, and they should have some blockers on there that are used to blocking like that as well. I was excited to see Garendo do it. I figured, what is he, 220, 220 something,
Yeah.
with almost Raheem Mostert like speed. That's a great combination for this play. He's out for several weeks with a hamstring strain. He might be on an injury list to begin the season as well. So, yeah, maybe we'll see Isaac Garendo in that spot, but I don't think it's going to be in September. So, then I think Deebo Samuel would be fantastic at it, but I don't think that Kyle Shanahan's going to use him as the every kickoff guy back there. So maybe it's Jordan Mason. That would seem to be a good spot for him. I think that they would have loved to see Jacob Cowing there too, another hamstring guy. So a lot of their kind of plans, their machinations for special teams and things like that have been put on pause because of some injuries to the rookies.
Let me ask you about Garendo because so there's the NFI, then there's the PUP, and if you get hurt before you get here, you're on the NFI, and you can stay on the NFI until you're ready to come off, right? The PUP is different, right? So Garendo's on the PUP because he got hurt here, and from what I had read, he's most likely going to be out. It sounds like it might be a month. If it is, I mean, is it possible that they either have to put an unhealthy Garendo on their 53-man roster, having played in no preseason games, or the other choice is IR him for the year? Did I hear that correctly?
I think that's right, and it's something that they've done in the past. You keep him on the regular roster to begin the season, and then you very quickly put him on IR and sign somebody else. So I think they're going to end up being veteran players that they feel like they could probably cut early on, only to kind of re-sign them very quickly thereafter. Trent Taylor might be that type of guy, for example.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the O-line and D-line. There might be a D lineman that they could do that with as well. So, bottom line is when you hear the initial list of cuts in early September, it's going to change very quickly, I think, right after that.
Couple more on your list here. One is the number 2 quarterback. I got to be honest, and this is one of my concerns. I don't think the 49ers are going to win any. I love what I've seen from Brock Purdy. I think he's getting better. And I think the good news is that he might be elevating his game to a point where he could start to carry this team in certain ways. That's the great news. The bad news is that if he goes down, I don't know that they have a backup quarterback that they can win any games with. I kind of like Tanner Mordecai, but I mean, not really. I mean, not a little bit, but I mean, I like some of his traits, but I mean, he and then there's Dobbs and Allen, and I just Saturday Dobbs you mentioned went 10 of 11. What do you think, Matty? Is Brandon Allen knows the system? Dobbs is a little bit more experienced. Mordecai is a undrafted rookie, but he played a lot in college, or at least was at 3 different programs. He played a lot at the end. What do you make of the quarterback? Are they going to keep 2? Will they keep 3? Is there any chance that Mordecai gets a job? And are we still debating? Is Dobbs doesn't have number 2 QB locked down, huh?
I think he's probably I won't say in the driver's seat. He got off to a rough start the first 3 practices, but the last 2 have been good. You mentioned Saturday. He was 5 of 8 today. And I think the key thing with him is that he makes aggressive throws down the field. And we saw that today with a pass to Mason Pline, for example. And then he had a good red zone touchdown. I forget who it was Juwan Jennings in the red zone for a TD. That has been a characteristic that Kyle Shanahan has really liked. It's what won Brock Purdy the job a couple of years ago. Who was the gosh? I can't remember who the backup quarterback was at
Sudfeld?
that. Was that Nate Sudfeld?
Nate
Um,
Sudfeld.
Sudfeld had a much better completion percentage at that point in training camp, but Sudfeld was throwing checkdowns. He was throwing to the running backs. He was throwing to the tight ends, whereas Purdy was pushing the ball downfield. Last year, you saw that with Sam Darnold. He was pushing the ball downfield. Wasn't always a completion, but he was ambitious with his throws, and there was a feeling in the coaching staff that once things start clicking, this is a guy that can move the ball in our offense. And I would say that is the dynamic at play right now between Allen and Dobbs. Allen might have the better completion percentage. Stats might look better, but Dobbs is the one who's attacking the field. The throw to Pline today, he had guys open underneath. He had the running back coming out to his right. He had another short pass over the middle. Both of them were open. He went for the ambitious throw down the sideline, and he hit it. And I really think that's what Shanahan and the rest of that offensive staff is looking for.
Yeah. And quietly behind the scenes in that comment was Pline, and Pline, I know we don't want to get too excited about Pline because he's an undrafted free agent, but there's a lot to be excited about there. I mean, we were talking about 10.5-inch hands. He's 6'8", super athletic, mechanical engineering major. Football is so much more about how smart you are than people would ever realize. And you got to do a lot as a tight end in this offense. And, the Pline should be a good fit. We'll see. A couple last ones on your list here. Number 3 corner. You got Demo and Mooney Ward as the 1 and the 2. You mentioned the Niners played nickel 80% of the snaps last year, 5th most in the NFL. So this third corner is valuable. And let's be honest, Matt, the game's a passing game. So your 4th and 5th corners become very valuable. That's the challenge. The good news here is that this is the deepest group of 49er corners I can remember in camp in a long, long time. What do you think? I mean, will they go with 6? And it sounds like unless there's injuries, they may be cutting or trading a corner here because they probably have 8 good ones.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've never seen it this good. I mean, when's the last time they used a first-round pick at cornerback? I think it was Mike Rumpf.
Right.
In that 2002 year. My point being is that they had not spent a lot of capital at that position. But this year they have. I mean, both Deommodore Lenoir and Charvarius Ward are going to be, among the top 10 cornerbacks in the league. And both of them, by the way, are going to be free agents in March. So if they're both top 10ers, I don't think either one of them is coming back. So it behooves the 49ers to have some young guns in the chute. And I think that's what they're looking at with Darrell Luter on the outside and Renardo Green on the inside for maybe not this season, but certainly for next season. But I think the guy who's going to end up being the third cornerback is Isaac Yiadom, who's looked really good. I mean, just consistently good in these practices. He was right there with Logan Thomas today on that first Brock Purdy interception. I'm not sure whether he caused it, but he was, close coverage. When he does get a ball his way, he's usually there to either pick it off or to bat it away. And then usually he's not being picked on. So, I mean, that's the mark of a great corner. You just don't throw in his direction at all. That was the Jimmy Johnson who just passed this year, Hall of Famer for the 49ers. He was known as the loneliest cornerback because no one ever threw in his direction. So I think that's how it's going to play out this season with Yiadom as the third cornerback, basically in the role that Ambry Thomas was in last year. And then next year, the 49ers need to basically bring Renardo Green in to become, either an outside cornerback or the inside cornerback, and go from there.
And lastly, Matty, and maybe the most important spot is the right guard spot. You got Feliciano, and Feliciano graded out very highly last year when he played. You had Burford, who had the disastrous play in the Super Bowl. He now has a broken hand. He'll probably be out at least 3-4 weeks, maybe longer. Then you got Dominic Pooney, we've heard some good things said about Pooney. I loved his disposition when we did the interview with him in the media room after the OTAs. I think he's an intriguing prospect. And then I got to be honest, just from watching the practice, I like what I see out of Drake Nugent, and I really like what I've seen in the last couple of days out of Jarrett Kingston, and they've been playing Kingston at right tackle. So, he's kind of separated as far as the other guys are thought to be interior. They've kicked him outside. What do you think? You've got more contacts than anybody. Of their 4 rookie offensive linemen, who are they secretly liking the most, do you think?
Well, Pooney, and Pooney could be the rare rookie starter under, a Kyle Shanahan coach team.
Wow.
That hardly ever happens. I think what they want to do, what they'll end up doing is I think they like John Feliciano there in what they hope is a Super Bowl year. I think they're very concerned that Feliciano could start 20 games this season, just given where he is in his career. I got hurt in the Super Bowl last year. So I think that the prospect of a rotation like they had a couple of years ago with Burford and Daniel Brunskill is very much on the table, where whether it's Burford or it's Dominic Pooney getting 2 series and then giving way to Feliciano to come in for 1, which would, minimize, would give the younger players experience. It would minimize Feliciano's wear and tear. I think they want Feliciano to be ready and taking the lion's share of the snaps once January rolls around. They just need to preserve him until that point. So, the injury to Burford's hand throws a sort of a monkey wrench into that plan, unless, Pooney really kind of seizes the opportunity. And I think so far he has. We've only had 1 padded practice. We haven't seen any kind of one-on-one reps, this, that, and the other. So there's a lot that he has to prove, but he's going to have the chance to do it. I mean, you and I are talking, they've been practicing for a week. It's July 29. They have all of August. They have some of September. So there is going to be time for Pooney to kind of prove that he deserves to be in the lineup for what Chris Furster said the other day was, the bright lights of Monday Night Football against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets to open the season. That's a tough ask, but I think that he's in position to pull it off.
No question. You'd be the guy to ask this last one too. And I don't, it's a weird thing because the Niners, they have said over and over and over again how much they love this player and Brandon Aiyuk, and they're very believable when they say it. And then I think of all the different things that would, that exist currently that drag on his production that are no fault of his own, right? They play at a pretty slow pace. They've got all these other weapons. They run the ball the most. They pass the ball the least. I mean, there's 4 or 5 different factors that all put a drag on his numbers, and yet he still put together a huge season, and he did it very efficiently. And yet they seem hesitant to want to pay him his price, and who knows what his price is. I bring all this up as a prelude because there is a story out, or the Athlon's Niner preview is quoting a NFL anonymous scout who says Brandon Aiyuk is not posturing. He's legitimately unhappy. And then I heard Schlereth, who I know is tight with Shanahan's dad, just absolutely just ripped the hell out of Aiyuk for holding in, saying it was kind of gutless and this and that. What do you think? I mean, and then Lynch, I mentioned to Lynch the other day, I said, hey, you guaranteed that Bosa would not be traded. Are you willing to guarantee that with the Aiyuk? And he's like, I did say that, didn't I? Like he didn't know it. He knew exactly. And he wouldn't go there. He would not guarantee. He's like, there are no absolutes. So it sounds weird. I mean, it sounds like the Niners love the player, but are like super, super dug in on their price, are not willing to move, and may even get to the point where they'll trade the player. And now we're reading stuff like, Aiyuk's legitimately unhappy. Maddie, this is the story that won't go away. I need to lean on your veteran expertise. You can cut through the chase better than me. What are we seeing here? Is this all nothing to see here? This is all going to get done, or is Aiyuk going to play somewhere else? Do they have is this all about Purdy's contract? I mean, fill me in here, because it seems like they have an inherent interest in getting this done on time, and yet it's not getting done on time.
I agree with you. This is a stark contrast between this season and last season, when Aiyuk was in for the spring, and he was taking a lot of reps at that point, and it was really kind of a launching pad for his fantastic season that he had. No reps in the spring. He's not getting any reps with Brock Purdy right now. It's different for a wide receiver versus a defensive end. Last year, like we saw with Nick Bosa, nobody runs as much as the wide receivers. So, if Aiyuk were to be signed the Thursday before the opener or the Friday before the opener, there's no way he could play his usual allotment of snaps. I'm not sure he would play at all in that case. You'd be so scared that he'd get some sort of hamstring strain or something like that would have him out for a month. You mentioned Bosa in your question to Lynch. I think that the 49ers did themselves a disservice last year by being so complimentary towards Nick Bosa, by saying, well, we don't really need him here. We know he's doing great work. We're going to forgive any fines that he accrues during his holdout. You know who was listening to that? Brandon Aiyuk's agent. And so, you come in armed with all that stuff in these negotiations. And so, I just think that that's working against them. Maybe it's the 49ers drawing a line in the sand with Aiyuk because they didn't draw a line in the sand with Nick Bosa. Remember, I mean, it's odd. They waited and waited and waited to sign Nick Bosa, and it's not like they gained anything from that. Bosa still got paid a mint. Right. The highest paid defensive player in all the land. I think he still is. So this is their negotiation stance. This is what they do. It didn't work with Nick Bosa, and I feel like that's only kind of emboldened anybody who comes along after Nick Bosa now.
Last one for you. Kyle Shanahan has hinted at the backup running back job being competitive. We know how much he loves Elijah Mitchell. He loves to finish with Elijah Mitchell, I think for two reasons. Mitchell has no negative yardage plays. He almost always falls forward, and he never fumbles. And those are two amazing factors you're trying to put away a football game. But he's got Jordan Mason, and man, Jordan Mason looks good. And Jordan Mason's averaging over 5.5 yards a carry for his entire career. And yet he never gets on the field. And Shanahan sounds like he may be open to getting Mason some more looks. I just wonder, like, if the Niners had played Mason, I don't know, 30% more, would they have gotten to Super Bowl Sunday with a healthier, fresher McCaffrey? Would that have made the difference? You got all these backs. You got to figure out a way to use all these backs. Just using McCaffrey over and over and over again and letting, Mason be as fresh as he's been late in the years almost seems just like the wrong way to go about it. I don't know. That's just, and what do I know? I'm not Shanahan. I don't have a 5,000 square foot home that's worth $12 million, but I do know running backs, and I know they got a bunch of good ones, and I'd like to see them use them all.
Yeah, I heard you live in a refrigerator box on the next to the interchange.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you with everything you said. I didn't include the running back in my um, uh, training camp battles, but I wish I had, because today when McCaffrey had the day off, the first running back through the order every time without fail wasn't Elijah Mitchell. It was Jordan Mason. So that kind of, that's why I asked the question after camp. Is that line more blurry than it's been? And I think it is. I
Yeah.
think the bottom line is exactly what you just said. Shanahan loves Elijah Mitchell. He's starting to really like Jordan Mason. Elijah Mitchell wasn't available a lot of last year. Jordan Mason, for whatever reason, hadn't won over Kyle Shanahan and probably Bobby Turner last year, which meant not just a lot of snaps for Christian McCaffrey, but the lion's share of the snaps. And I think you're right. I think there's going to be more of a willingness to kind of spread things around. I think that's going to be a theme this season. And we're already seeing it in training camp. I mean, McCaffrey's already had 2 days off. Bosa's already had 2 days off. Saving everybody for the end of the season, I think, is going to be a big priority. I mean, we all saw what happened when the playoffs began. They were running in quicksand against the Packers. They were running in quicksand against the Detroit Lions. And to their credit, they were able to kind of regain all that for the Super Bowl. And they played hard, and they played fast, and they played, for the most part, well. They started to fall apart at the end, but I don't know if any. I mean, so were the Chiefs' defense at that point. But I think that is something that is high on their minds as they start this season. Let's not, go into January with tired legs that seemed to be the case last year.
Awesome stuff. This is just typical of the type of content that Matt and Dave produce in The Athletic. So I would encourage everybody here, almost 1,000 people in the room. If you're not members of The Athletic, definitely during Niner season, this is really when you want to be a member of The Athletic, because Matty does an incredible job. Dave does as well. They coordinate their stuff. They do all kinds of stuff in print, in audio form, all kinds of stuff. On the way out the door, Trent Williams. I mean, he's such a great player, and it's such a big topic if he's really going to hold out for a long period of time. I can't imagine that he's going to, but who knows? I mean, I wasn't expecting this, but you've been covering this team longer than I have. Were you expecting this?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. We should have asked the question on the opening day of training camp, but this was kind of rumored to be possibly problematic back in the spring, when it was clear that he no longer was the highest paid offensive lineman in all the land, even though he's playing like the best one. So that's the bottom line with these players now. Once their contract seems like it's kind of old and doesn't really kind of suit the player, they ask for more money, and frankly, they should. But if everybody's asking for it, eventually the well is going to run dry.
It's a hard cap. And Moncreen Eggcorn finishes with this. He says, "What's the latest scuttle on viable free agents for defensive end? Sands, Drake Jackson, Patella setback." Matty, has there been any speculation of a Taco Charlton en route to Santa Clara, or because I mean we're pretty much there. I mean you can look at these other guys they have on the roster, and they can talk them up all they want, but those guys have no pedigree of success, and it's such a vital position. I gotta think we're no more than 4 or 5 days away from seeing some new defensive end trying on a jersey.
Yeah, that usually happens. But like Shanahan said today, they knew that they weren't going to have Drake Jackson, and they haven't had any other issues, knock on wood, along the defensive line. So they're set until something else happens and they lose somebody. But it's been there's always one position that's full of injuries every summer. Right now, it's wide receiver for this team. So that's the spot that they've already had to add a couple of bodies.
Maddie, it's a whole week of camp in the books, and you're looking very not burned. You see me, I'm kind of burned. I'm starting to peel. The veteran that you are, you're not burnt. You're not peeling. You've properly hydrated. You've properly protected yourself. What's the secret to being a veteran at camp?
SPF 50, Larry. You can't go lower than 50.
Yeah, there you go. All right, hey. Everybody, go order The Athletic. Sign up for The Athletic. Follow Matt in The Athletic. Until next time, peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for.